Hi, Jeff.
Hey, Douglas, how are you?
Dude, I'm sorry for being a little late. Is my interpreter available?
Yes, she is.
Oh, who is she?
Carita? If you look on the
Okay.
participant.
All right, I got her. All right, I'm going to pin her right now. Thank you.
Perfect.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. So our agenda for today is obviously first to do a quick roll call. And since the director is on, I want to take the moment to call everyone by name so you can introduce yourself and give the organization that you're representing. We're going to do a bit of a recap of 2021, some of the key action items based on our conversations over the last several months. And then we'll jump right into the discussion at hand, the key topic for today, which is ongoing over the next several months, which is the emissions reduction strategy, or what we are now calling the Clean Air Plan. We'll talk about some additional port initiative highlights and then go to next steps. So that's the agenda for this evening or afternoon. And so with that, I am going to go down the list in no particular order. It's the order I see you in as on my participants list. So, and I'll just call you out. If you can unmute, introduce yourself and the organization you represent, we would appreciate it. So I'm Kim Polari with HDR, and we are supporting the Port of Stockton in the Port Outreach Committee, and we do other things like supporting in communications and things of that nature. So I will be facilitating the meeting this evening. The next person I see is Alejandro Cruz.
Hey, thank you so much. Hey, everybody, Alejandro Cruz, and I'm representing Rise Stockton as well as Third City Coalition.
Great. I see Cynthia Lau.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Lau, and I'm here on behalf of the Environmental Justice Coalition for Water.
Welcome. Next, I see Doug, do you want to unmute yourself and introduce yourself? I'll come back to Doug. He's probably connecting with the.
Can you hear me?
Pardon me?
Can you?
There was some issue with sound.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, Kim, I think when people mute and unmute, it beeps over everyone else's audio at the same time.
Okay. Hector, you're the next on the list.
Hi, Hector Olivares, Catholic Charities Diocese of Stockton, and I think him, his. That's it for me.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Doug Vigil. I'm a disabled advocate for the community resident. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I see an E Ward.
My name's Ed Ward. I'm with Valley Pacific Petroleum, a member of both Stockton and Fresno AB 617 communities. I'm sorry to say this, but I will have to leave a little bit early, but I am supportive of the port's efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And Hiro Ambrose, and please correct me when I mispronounce your name.
Good evening, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alejandro Ambrose, and I'm a air resource engineer at the California Air Resources Board in the Office of Community Air Protection.
Welcome. Margot?
Hi, everybody. I'm Margot Prowse. I'm a resident of Stockton. I'm a resident member of the steering committee for AB 617. And I'm pleased to be involved with the port efforts to make a difference in our community. We want to see progress. And I'm also going to have to leave early. I have to leave by a little bit before 5. Thank you.
Mary Elizabeth?
Hi, Mary Elizabeth, Stockton resident, member also of the AB 617 Steering Committee and Conservation Chair of the Delta Sierra Group of the Sierra Club.
Thank you. Matt Holmes?
Hi, thank you. Matt Holmes, Environmental Justice Director at Little Manila Rising, he, him, masculine pronouns, doing a whole bunch of citizen science, air monitoring, and policy work around ports and industrial emissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Monica White?
Can everyone hear me? Okay, good evening. My name is Monica White. I'm a supervising public health educator with public health services here in Stockton or San Joaquin County.
Ryan Hayashi?
Yeah, good afternoon, Ryan Hayashi. I'm with the Valley Air District.
Welcome. Sophia?
Everyone, this is Sophia from Rising Sun Center for Opportunity in Stockton. Thank you. Pronouns she, her, hers.
Great. And from the port, Jeff, do you want to introduce the team here? Obviously I see Victoria and Karen and Jason and the director.
Sure. We've got the port director here, Kirk DeJesus. We've got Jason Catendoy, our deputy director of operations. We've got Victoria Lucero, who is our public relations coordinator. And I want to introduce everybody to 2 new members of the team, Karen Romero and Julia Patello, that you will be probably receiving email or some sort of coordination through. So welcome them to the group tonight.
And Jeff, this is Jason Cashman. I don't know if you don't see me on there, but I'm on here as well. I'm the Ports Environmental and Regulatory Affairs Manager.
Thank you. Sorry, Jason.
No problem.
And Shannon, you want to introduce your team?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Shannon Arnold. I'm the Vice President at Rebel Media. We are a remote team of 10, including graphic designers, web developers, copywriters, and photographers, specializing in brand positioning and communicating sustainability achievements visually.
And Renee is one of our speakers for this evening that's going to guide us through the presentation. Renee?
Hi, I'm Renee Moylanen with Starcrest Consulting Group, and we're helping the Port of Stockton develop the Clean Air Action Plan.
Okay, did I miss anybody? I think I got everybody.
Jonathan joined.
Oh, there you are. Yes, I see that. Jonathan, want to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, Jonathan Pruitt, the Environmental Justice Coordinator at Catholic Charities, Diocese of Stockton.
Great. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We want to talk through some key action items and just topics that we've discussed at previous meetings. So one of the things we did to try and get this on your calendar ahead of time, this link and calendar invite that you received for tonight's meeting actually is a reoccurring, and so we've got it going through January, February, and March. So you'll use the same link. It should show up on your calendar each third Wednesday afternoon. We wanted to, we've heard from you quite a bit on potential topics in previous meetings that we want to cover, and we've just listed some of those key topics here. We will make sure that these stay on the radar over the next several months. We'll be focusing on the emissions reduction strategy. However, we definitely want to continue to take suggestions and ideas for future meeting topics. So we wanted to highlight that. There's some key topics and action items that we had from our November meeting, which was the last meeting. As you all know, we've skipped over December. So Jeff, if you want to talk a little bit about the stormwater data request and the progress you've made there.
Yeah, sure. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully everybody had a nice holiday and is staying safe and healthy. One of the big issues that was put on the table for November was having a summary of our stormwater data somewhere on our website that folks could easily find and reference. And so we've taken a look at that. You know, it is, I think Barbara brought it up last time, but although it is readily available for the public, we are going to be kind of proactive and go ahead and summarize that data and have it placed on our website. Right now we've got the receiving water data, but in the next few weeks, everything should be ready and up for review on our website. So that's all I have on the stormwater data.
Okay, great. And we wanted to give an update on CEQA project environmental review and promote some of the current activities. I believe, Jason, you're up for that.
Yeah, so good afternoon, everybody. Currently, the port has one CEQA document out for public review, and that is a draft EIR for the TC NoCal project, and it's a warehousing and distribution center. The port sent out notice of this review last week. I think it was January 11th to pretty much everyone who's requested notice of it. And if anyone here did not get an email identifying this project and that's put up for public review, please let us know and we'll make sure that I send you out an email. And that email will tell you when the public review period ends, brief description of the project, and also where to find this document to download. And it's currently available on the port's website under the environmental tab, and it will say TC NorCal project.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. And our CEQA consultant, Katie Chamberlain from Anchor QEA, will provide just a brief description of this project for you guys right now.
Sure. Yeah, so thanks, Jason. So the project involves the port issuance of a lease to TC NoCal Development to construct and operate a new warehouse facility and associated infrastructure on approximately 60 acres of the West Complex to receive, store, and distribute bulk building products and consumer goods. The project also involves remediation of contaminated soils from past naval activities on the Rough Ready Island. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. There's also a, on the website, I will say that there is a link, or there's a public meeting scheduled for this project. And there is a link for clicking to, get into that meeting, which unfortunately is a WebEx meeting, FYI. You just click on that on the day of the meeting and you'll be right into it. And the meeting is scheduled for February 1st at 6 p.m. That is a Tuesday.
And I do see Mary Elizabeth. One thing I do want to confirm is we had the request to make sure that this POC membership is included on all future distribution lists for environmental CEQA project information, and we did cross-reference them, and we'll continue, if this group grows or whatnot, we'll continue to make sure that you are included. So just wanted to flag that. That was one of our action items as well. So go ahead, Mary Elizabeth, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. I just was wondering, you wanted to follow up on the stormwater data, and so you're looking to have it easily found. And don't you already, summarize those for reports to the Regional Water Quality Control Board, Jeff?
We do. We provide all of the data, yes, and upload it all to the smart system. So it is available there, but we're trying to put it in an easy to digest format to have it visible on our website.
Okay, like a PDF or Excel, or
I think it is a PDF. It's a graphic right now. It's kind of how we're trying to have it laid out. So it's.
And that was actually a request, an action item from the last November meeting, was understanding that data sits at the water board, and sometimes it's hard to find. The request was put out to Jeff and the port if through their data collection, if they could also, even though they're required to report it through the smart system, that they could share that information on their website as well. So that's what they're working to do with regard to graphics.
Yeah, and I think we presented the stormwater improvement project last time as well, and we are going to try to figure out the effectiveness and just see how effective that wetland is to filter out contaminants in stormwater as well.
Okay, and then just I was wondering if just to follow up on this meeting here that I'm not able to attend, and maybe there might be some others, is the public meeting there where you're going to be discussing the project in a little bit more detail so folks can better engage in the CEQA process. Will that be recorded and available on your website?
Yes, it will be.
Okay, thank you.
And that actually, so Doug, I'll come back to you in 1 second. I apologize. I just saw your hand. One of the action items for us was just to identify if the Port Commission meetings are actually able, because they're live casted, if they're able to be closed captions. And they are, not during the live cast, but after the Port Commission meeting. If you go to the link on the website, there's an option to include closed captioning. So that option is available. It's just not available at that during the live broadcast. So just wanted to flag that as well. Doug, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, can you send me that link so I can look at it? Because unfortunately, I'd rather see it live than have a caption live than later to review it. Last time I was there last time, what is the CPU? I mean, the CPUC requirement? Is that okay? That's an acronym that I'm not aware of, but is that related to the storm?
No, Douglas, that's the California Public Utilities System. They are the agency that oversees our electric utility. And so in the past, there have been some discussion about how if we can get cleaner power or potentially get power from our renewable facility here at the port. And so it's just a topic for future discussions. I think Matt had brought it up at one point. So we just want to let folks know that it's on the, we haven't lost sight of it, that we're going to come back to it and hit it in the next couple of meetings or so.
Okay, now because lately, the past couple of months, I've been getting calls from solar energy power, and they said like and I was wondering it goes through the city, did it go to the county or the state level, or is it coming from a random company that called? Because they said, well, you are eligible for a free solar, but I don't know how much would it cost to put it up and put it on my house and have it work. And what is the purpose? Because my appliance is all electricity. The only thing that's gas is a water heater. That's it. So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of private companies out there right now trying to put solar on a lot of homes. So it's probably a private company that's calling you.
Okay.
I get a lot of those calls.
So it's not going through you at the Port of Stockton or anybody else through the. Okay, all right. That's what I need to know. Thank you.
We don't reach out to any consumers, and the only electric utility users that we have are port tenants.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
So one of the other conversations and discussions we had at the last meeting in November was just if at the POC meetings, if we could share potential other organizational meetings that maybe this group might be interested in. It was in relation to the CARB meetings and the discussion we were having around that. Renee, I know you had the action item there. You want to report out on that?
Well, one of the things that I was going to do today, I'm happy to do it now, is to provide a web link. I can put it in the chat, which links to the California Air Resources Board's website where you can sign up for all of their public announcements, all the workshops and meetings, and you can select which regulations you're interested in. So let me do that now. And I highly recommend for those of you who are interested in following the air regulations in California, just put your email in there. CARB is really good about, did that go through? Yeah. They're really good about providing, notice of meetings, but they don't spam you. So it's a really good thing to put your email in there so you can stay on top of everything.
Okay, and last is from our November meeting is the vegetative barrier design. Jeff, you want to report out on that?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit. I know that Matt, and thank you. When he came out to the port, he helped introduce us to, I think, one of his colleagues that he's worked with at other facilities to install vegetative barriers. And so I have been in touch with Brent at, I think you pronounce it Hyphy, Matt? Is that how you pronounce it? I know some of our other consultants.
Yeah, that's correct. Hi-fi, hi-fi, depends on whether or not you learned Latin in Germany or in England.
Oh, got it.
But it's the radical offshoot of a root.
Perfect. All right. So so he's putting together a scope and cost estimate for us. I've kind of shared our desires to focus, at least initially, over in the Lehigh project area, and then kind of work the boundary of the port to the south from there. But we're going to take a holistic approach to, as well as a project by project approach for developing effective vegetative barriers. So look forward to hearing back from him soon and have something I can share with you guys in the very near future.
Matt, I can see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that I really appreciate you all taking the time to talk to Hyphy. We've begun projects together, but I transitioned away from that project. But they've done really, so I haven't ever finished a barrier with Hyphy Design Labs, but they've done really great work with the National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health. So they're a science-based sort of applied research organization. So I think it's great that they want to work at the port. And I also think it's great that you guys are moving a little faster on this than the rest of us in sort of city right away and Caltrans right away. But we're talking about our AB 617 trees subcommittee process and that work plan, and really the need for an integrated greening management plan that would absolutely need to acknowledge the tree assets that you have and any planned vegetative barriers. So I could see there being a nice way for your projects to be described accurately and to sort of capture the total benefits of forestry around barriers. So thinking about buying my own tree plotter license as well, so that it's easy to integrate the data on all that. But glad to see you guys moving forward on that, and look forward to hearing from Hyphy as well soon.
Yeah, Matt, is it possible for you to be able to utilize the tree plotter that we purchased and integrate that into AB 617 planning?
Yeah, for me, I'm sure, and I won't speak for the Air District. It's just whether or not the city can play with that data or not. They actually have a really great inventory, but whether or not it's formatted in such a way as to be integratable with tree plotter is my question. So we're starting a new large tree planting project, and I just want to plant the trees and collect the data in the most flexible way possible, because all of these companies, sell you an upgraded version every 5 years that makes the old version obsolete. And I think that's what's going on with the city's inventory. But,
yeah. Well, when we made that investment, our intent was to be able to try to share it with, Boggs Tract and with the city and whoever else wants to utilize it. So if you want to reach out, we can make you a user, and and anybody else too from the AB 617 group who wants to have access to it.
Yeah, cool. I'd really appreciate that. We planted our first 28 trees last Monday at Matty Harrell Park. 2,000 to go.
Great. Excellent.
Okay, with that, we'll move right into the main topic of the afternoon, which is the Clean Air Plan and next step.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. So I think if you recall last meeting in November, we discussed kind of the overall elements of a clean air plan that the port's going to put together with your help and with your input. I think we talked about kind of just the overall goals of an emission reduction strategy and the different elements of it. And so this month we really want to focus on the emission reduction strategies. And so we've asked Renee to come and talk to us a little bit about kind of what that looks like and kind of give us an update.
Okay, thank you. All right, next slide. Oh.
Oh, we got to go to the other presentation.
Oh, sorry. Okay, good. I was like, I'm not prepared to speak to this slide.
Okay. Make sure, why don't I, one
Well,
moment.
while we're waiting, maybe I'll just kind of start talking through the first few slides, and then you can look at the visuals when they pop up. One of the things that this group had asked us to do the last time was to provide a sense of what the overall process and the timeline is going to be to develop this clean air plan. And so we've sort of mapped out what the next roughly 10 months are going to look like in terms of the types of topics that we're going to bring to this committee and the activities. And it takes us through to roughly August of this year when we anticipate releasing the draft plan with the hope to finalize it in the fall timeframe.
Good night, Annie. See you tomorrow.
And then, do you want me to share the presentation?
Go ahead and share.
Okay.
It's spinning. I apologize.
Let me call it up.
Oh.
If you are unmuted, if you can mute so that we're not getting background, that would be much appreciated.
Okay.
Kim, I just resent it to you if you want to check your email.
Are you guys able to see that?
Yes.
Okay. I am just going to, I'll share from my screen. All right. So this is the timeline that I was just referring to. And we've already done some of this. So these first two, we provided the overview. We did a little basics about air planning and how you approach developing policies. So today we're going to focus on the emission reduction strategies, as Jeff said. Next month, we're going to focus on implementation mechanisms, which are ways that we can get our industry partners to start adopting some of these emission reduction strategies. And then from March to June, each month we'll come back to this group and do a little bit of a deeper dive on the different source categories for pollution at the Port of Stockton. And the source categories are the sources of emissions: ships, trucks, trains, Harborcraft, and cargo handling equipment and locomotives. Those are the port sources. So if I say source categories, that's what I'm referring to. And we're going to do deeper dives each month. And then, as I said, with the goal of having a final clean air plan in fall of this year. So a little bit of a refresher from the last time we met, because it's been a while. We talked about how to develop air quality policies and programs. And there's two components. There's the emission reduction strategy. That's the technology or the behavior change that lowers emissions from the baseline, that actually gets that pollution to be reduced. And you couple that with an implementation mechanism, which is the method that you use to get the industry to adopt that strategy. So again, today, we're going to be focusing on the emission reduction strategy piece. And then next month, we'll talk about implementation mechanisms. But first, a little bit of context here. When you start a planning process, looking at how you can reduce emissions at a given port or facility, it always helps to have an understanding of where the emissions are coming from. So these next few slides showcase data from the Port of Stockton emissions inventory, which I know we've had a presentation on, but now you can really start to see how you use these data to plan for your emission reduction strategies, and then they'll become really important as we track our progress once we start implementing the strategies. So this first chart is showing nitrogen oxide emissions, or we call it NOx. And you can see that the biggest contributor to NOx at the Port of Stockton are the ships. This is very, very typical. Almost every port I've ever seen emissions from, the ships dominate in terms of the NOx emissions. And then the next biggest category are the locomotives. And then you've got pretty equal distribution among the trucks, the cargo handling equipment, and the Harborcraft. So this is for the NOx emissions. This next chart is showing particulate matter 2.5 emissions, and we're very interested in particulate matter because this is the pollutant that is really associated with health risk. And what you'll start to see is that this pie has changed a little bit. So the ships still dominate, but the trucks are now down to 1% of the PM 2.5 contribution, which is pretty negligible, and that has a lot to do with the new engine requirements and things like that have reduced the PM. And then you start to see, once you ratchet down one of these categories, the others sort of pop up because all of these percentages are relative. And then the last pollution category are the greenhouse gases. And this one looks totally different from the others. So you can see that now the ships are less than half of the contribution to the greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gas emissions are all about fuel use. They're about activity. So the ships are a lower percentage, but now look at the trucks. The trucks have really popped up in terms of the contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, and the locomotives. And then the others are sort of the Harborcraft and cargo handling equipment, sizable shares, but clearly trucks and ships are a big contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So, this information is not the answer. It's one piece of the puzzle. There are challenges to developing strategies to some of these sources. The ships in particular are really tough to reduce emissions from. But it starts to sort of guide the planning process. And that's one of the values of the emissions inventory. And then as the port starts implementing some of these strategies over the next few years, you'll see these pies change. So it's a really good way to measure our effectiveness. I'm going to pause for a second because the next part of this presentation is walking through each of the source categories and talking about emission reduction strategies for that source, and then some of the opportunities and challenges that we see at the Port of Stockton. But before I do that, are there any questions? And I can't see anything from my screen, so I can't hear you, Kim. Are you? Nothing?
We'll keep an eye out. I don't see
Okay,
anything
good.
yet.
I will forge
I
ahead.
don't see anything yet. Matt, your hand's still up, but I think that earlier.
I just put it back up.
Okay.
Curious, I've got your source apportionment document. I'm wondering what you're rounding into your GHG category, besides carbon, I assume.
Yes, and I need to look at Port of Stockton's inventory specifically, but typically it's CO2, and we developed this what we call CO2e. It's a CO2 equivalent metric that combines a bunch of the different greenhouse gases,
Like the short-lived climate pollutants and all those things like black carbon and methane. Yeah,
that's typically how Starcrest does that, and I'm sure that they did it that way for the Stockton inventory as well.
Do you have any insight into? I mean, I've got a pretty dense table here in the source apportionment appendix C from our community emissions reduction plan that was built off of a lot of, I think, your calculations, and just new research coming out about volatile organic compounds and public health risks, and I would be curious to see an allocation, a pie chart of of VOCs.
Yeah.
If that's,
And
I'm looking at it, I suppose I could probably do that myself, but I think for the public, that would be an interesting thing to learn about, because these VOCs get cooked by a little bit of sunlight and become into real respiratory irritants in our community.
Right. And so that I'll check with the StarCrest inventory team, because I do know that we report VOCs for some ports. I don't know if we did it for Stockton. But all of these pollutants don't exist in silos. They interact with each other in the atmosphere, and they create all sorts of different issues. So it is, even nitrogen oxides, many of the air districts have said are linked to some health issues. So PM is the particulate matter is the one that we know has a cancer link, but all of these others contribute as well. So I will look into that. I'll make a note of that for the next meeting to get back to you on that.
I'll tell you why I think it would be useful is that, the lore is that most of the VOCs that were sort of, there's just a lot of boundary crossing from refinery activity and vehicle activity in the Bay Area and prevailing winds. So if we had some kind of an idea as to what the port's role is in this, then we could talk about this background VOC level and talk about where it's coming from.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, the Port of Stockton emissions inventory is based on equipment data. So it's not based on the ambient air, and you're the air monitoring guy, right?
Yeah.
So it's all of this stuff sort of gets confounded in the atmosphere, which is why we often recommend that ports use their activity-based emissions inventories as the metric for measuring their own contributions. Because you're right, once this stuff gets into the air, it's hard to really measure who's contributing what.
Yeah, and my agenda here is to get, my air quality constituency to obviously understand everything that's going on at the port, but to recognize this larger interregional dynamic that, in my opinion, is the primary pollutant in our community.
Yeah, for sure.
Matt, we're in the middle of doing another inventory for 2020, so we'll talk to the team and see if VOCs is something they could work on.
Great, yeah, and then we're looking at the new US EPA Community Air Grant opportunity, and it's a sizable grant, and it'd be nice to do some instrumentation upwind of you. I think I know what we would find. So that's something we're looking at, but it would definitely go a lot further if we were looking at that with you instead of around you. So we got a lot to talk about on that, Jeff.
Okay.
So I see Mary Elizabeth's hand and then Willie. Mary.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to hear you out. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, because it kind of looked like it froze a little bit. So I just want to, make sure that everyone understands clearly, that, for example, this 600,000 plus square foot warehouse that the port is planning on including in their West complex will involve trucks that go beyond the port boundary. And those trucks that go beyond the port boundary will continue to pollute the community and not be captured in any port emission project. So the port, when they did their emission inventory, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, please do, limited the boundary of their system, so to speak, to include the port area, not outside and in the greater area of Stockton. So I just want to make sure that everyone on this call is aware of that. And when we're talking about these kinds of emissions, they're limited to emissions that occur on the port. Well, if those emissions, and the recommendations of CARB and Department of Justice, Attorney General's office warehousing recommendations to reduce emissions related to community impacts is followed, then, those impacts will occur throughout the community. But as yet, the emissions that we are considering are limited only to the port.
So, Mary Elizabeth, I will share some good news when we get to the trucks section. There is a lot of activity at the state level to get at these emissions from the statewide perspective. So I think that's a great point that you bring up, and we'll talk about that on the truck slide. Was there another hand up? I think Willie, was that the next name that?
Willie, do you have a question? You took your hand down, so I want to make sure we give you a chance. You're on mute if you're talking. Okay. Oh, there you go.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to call out that I thought that the pie charts were informational, but it's hard to actually get actionable items out of those charts. Do we have a sense of how those numbers shake out over time? Like, is it an increase in ships over the past 5 years, over the past 10 years? And then also, I'm not sure what success looks like. What are we benchmarking it against? Are we benchmarking it against past performance, California averages? I'm just trying to get a sense of more context for the data here.
Yeah, I think those are all really great questions. And of course, what those charts didn't show is the overall emissions levels from the Port of Stockton, which is really what you want to start measuring over time. As I understand it, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, the 2018 emissions inventory was the first one that Stockton had done, and there's plans to do another one this year, and then they'll be done on a regular basis. And that's where you really start to be able to measure your progress. It's one piece of the puzzle. It gives you an idea of where your biggest drivers are, but not your only drivers, right? Like, there are clearly some community concerns, for example, that may not resonate with the numbers in the emissions inventory that are as equally valid as what the data show. So all of it's a balance. It's one input. And I think where the value of the emissions inventory really comes into play is over a period of time. I think the Port of Stockton's goal is to see progressive reduction of emissions from port sources. But there's certainly a lot of discussion about what that means in terms of numbers.
Yeah, Renee, that's exactly right. I mean, the reason we chose 2018 at the time, that was our busiest year. And so, and it was before we kind of had implemented the use of any zero emission equipment. And so we wanted to kind of get a snapshot. And then as we move forward, kind of, well, the reason we wanted to take a snapshot is to figure out what were our biggest sources, and then to develop a strategy and a plan, which is what we're doing right now, to be able to go after and reduce those emissions.
And that's one of the things that we will define in the Clean Air Plan is how we measure progress. That's going to be an important piece of this. So I'm going to move ahead into the source categories. If folks have questions, they could put it in the chat, or I'll stop at certain points so we can make sure that we're all on the same page. So the first source category are the ships, and the emission reduction strategies for ships. New engines is a great way to reduce emissions, and this is across the board. This strategy is going to be in every source category, because we've got organizations like the International Maritime Organization, which regulate ships on the international level. And then we've got, in this country, the Environmental Protection Agency, which regulates engine standards for all of the other source categories we're going to be talking about. These agencies are constantly requiring new engine standards that are ratcheting down the emissions over time. So the newer the equipment, the newer the engine, the cleaner it's going to be. That's across the board. For ships, there's also a strategy called shore power, or capture and control. And that targets the emissions of a ship while it's at berth, which means when the ship is parked at the wharf, loading and unloading cargo, typically they're idling their engines because they still have to power the lights, the refrigeration, all of their onboard systems. With shore power, the ship can turn off the engines and plug into the electric grid, and that eliminates those emissions at berth. It doesn't work for every ship, and when we get to that presentation much later, when we talk about the ships, we'll talk about that. So for ships that can't do shore power, there are also these emerging technologies that we call capture and control. And these are technologies that might be on a barge that pull up alongside the ship. They've got a device that fits over the smokestack of the ship that filters out the pollutants. So that's another option for controlling the emissions when the ships are at berth. Speed reduction is another one. The slower a ship goes, the less fuel it burns, which results in fewer emissions. It's not going to be a good option for Port of Stockton, not to give you a spoiler alert, but the ships are already really moving very slowly at the Port of Stockton, so this one is probably not going to work well here. And then there's all sorts of alternative fuels emerging for ships, like ammonia, methanol, liquefied natural gas. So those are some of the emission reduction strategies that we see for ships. A few opportunities for reducing the emissions of the ships at Port of Stockton. The first is that the state has passed a new regulation that requires certain types of ships to reduce their emissions at berth, either using shore power or these capture and control systems. And that's going to cover the tankers at Stockton beginning in 2027. So that's going to reduce emissions about 10% from the tankers. We also see that there is a global interest in reducing carbon emissions all across the world. Countries and these multinational companies are looking at ways to reduce climate change and to reduce their carbon emissions. So there's lots of international collaborations and incentive programs specifically aimed at reducing emissions from ships because they are an international problem. But there are a lot of challenges with ships. You'll notice there's a lot more bullet points here than there were on the previous slide. And one of the biggest challenges is that ships are global assets. They're not a captive fleet, which is a term that we use to describe equipment or vehicles that stay at the port. Ships move all over the world. A ship might call the Port of Stockton once and never come back. Another ship comes in. So it's really hard, and they're regulated at the international level. So the US is pretty limited in what it can do to impose requirements on ships. The emission reduction technologies are very expensive, and there's not a lot of funding programs for ships because they move around so much. There's also the issue that many of Stockton's vessels, the bulk vessels, are exempt from the at-berth regulation. So those emissions are not going to be controlled by this new state law. And also, Stockton does not share vessels with other ports. So if you are a container port, you'll find that the same ship, the ships follow these routes, like a bus route. They start in Shanghai, they come to Los Angeles, they go up to Oakland, they go to Seattle, they go back to Shanghai. And they keep making that loop, constantly, which means that if you're Oakland, you can benefit from cleaner ships coming to Long Beach. That's not the case at Stockton. The ships come to Stockton and there's not a lot of sharing with other ports, which just means that Stockton has to work extra hard to make sure that they're doing what they can to control these ship emissions, but they don't get the benefit of working with other ports. All right, moving on to rail, which are the locomotives. Again, the most common emission reduction strategies, the new engines, new locomotives. There's also some emerging alternative fuels, and even zero emissions is emerging. Battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell locomotives are starting to be developed and tested. The opportunities.
I'm
Yeah.
so sorry to interrupt. Willie, I see your hands, and I just want to make sure before we move forward in slides, did you still have a question or comment?
Yeah, I did. I'm not an expert in this space. I guess I'm kind of curious as it relates to ships. They're owned by private corporations, correct? So a lot of their decision making on the ships are from these corporations, not exactly ports. Is it customary for ports to participate in offering some kind of subsidy to private corporations like this? I don't know what the landscape is typically like for this situation.
So real quickly, to make it even more complicated, there are ship owners. So there are companies that own ships, and they will often lease the ships to a shipping line, which is the one that actually operates the ship. So there's that complication. And then you're right, the ports very rarely have direct relationships with the shipping lines. But there are ports that have offered incentive programs to, if a clean ship calls, then they, give it a small incentive that goes to the shipping lines. And then you have to sometimes be creative about how you get that incentive back to the shipping line because there's no contractual relationship there.
Yeah, and I would just say that we're a part of the American Association of Port Authorities, and in the chat, Matt mentions that the ships are governed by the International Maritime Organization, and in the U.S. we've been.
Did Jeff freeze?
We have been pushing and.
For me as well.
And really work together. That has not happened so far.
Can you repeat what you just said? You froze.
I was going to say we've been pushing the IMO. The U.S. ports have been pushing the IMO to set standards for ships and increase and improve standards for a long time, and it just has not happened.
Okay. So for the locomotives, a couple of the big opportunities coming up is that the California Air Resources Board is working on a regulation to control emissions from locomotives. Lots of elements to the proposed regulation and it may change, but it's pushing this industry towards zero emissions in roughly the 2035 timeframe. There is some zero emissions technology emerging. The good news is that there's funding available to replace locomotives. And the port does have a direct connection to the short line rail operator, which is the rail operator that's working within the port district. There are the line haul operators, which is like Union Pacific, BNSF, that go beyond the port and even, across the country to other states that the port does not have that direct connection to, and they're particularly challenging. They are large national companies. The locomotive companies have federal protections that actually preclude state and certainly port and regional agencies from trying to control the emissions from locomotives. So that's a big obstacle with the locomotives. And then the emission reduction technologies are also very expensive for locomotives. Okay. Yeah, that's true, Matt.
I did want to just mention real quick that the Air District, I think they mentioned it in the last AB 617 meeting, is talking to CCT about a grant opportunity to replace or retrofit one of their existing engines here at the port. And they have done others as well.
I'm sorry, I just want to reiterate, the request about using acronyms. So yes. CCT means Central California Traction Company. Yeah.
Yes, that is our short line railroad. Correct. Sorry about that, Mary.
Okay, moving on to trucks. The emission reduction strategies for trucks, new trucks, cleaner. And then we are really starting to see zero emissions trucks, battery electric and fuel cell trucks. Another strategy is rerouting away from communities. The interesting thing about this one, which we'll talk about more when we get into that trucks discussion in a few months, is rerouting may not reduce the overall emissions from trucks because they may have to actually drive farther distances, which results in more emissions, but it certainly reduces the health impact on the local community by shifting those emissions farther away. So that's definitely another strategy for trucks. The opportunities here, again, the state is being really proactive and aggressive on trucks. Lots of regulations that have been passed and that are in the works. The drayage truck regulation, and there's also a truck and bus regulation, already calling for, this is an old regulation, but there's still a milestone coming up that all trucks must be model year 2010 or newer by 2023. The state just passed the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation, which requires truck manufacturers to begin producing zero emissions trucks in 2024. So that's when we're going to start to see commercialized zero emissions trucks, which is really exciting. And then the state is also working on the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation. And it's in the very formative stages now, but some of the early proposals have shown that there would be a clean transition to zero emission trucks beginning in 2024 with a goal of reaching all zero emissions in 2035. So that's one that this group should monitor if you're interested in sort of the broader impacts of trucks, making sure that you attend those workshops related to the Advanced Clean Fleets regulation and providing some comments to CARB. That would be really helpful. Other opportunities, as I said, zero emissions truck technology is advancing. The total cost of ownership for these zero emission trucks for the operators is often lower, which is great. And there's a lot of state grant funding available, $1 billion this year, much of it targeting trucks. So this is lots of opportunities here to replace some trucks. There are some challenges. The zero emission trucks are a lot more expensive than the diesel trucks. And many of the truck operators are independent operators. So it might be, one guy who owns one truck and they have very small profit margins. They work really hard and they may not be able to afford these new trucks, even with the subsidies from the state. With the zero emission trucks, they're electric, they're hydrogen fuel cell. There's also this issue of infrastructure. They need electric chargers, just like electric cars need chargers. They need access to hydrogen fuel. And the port has no direct connection to the trucking industry. So there's no relationships there, not even from the terminals to the trucking companies. It's a very diffuse network, and in Stockton in particular, it's even more diffuse. There aren't even really any associations or organizations that sort of get the truck operators together. And there are some Stockton trucks, some of the more specialized trucks that may be exempt from some of these regulations coming up. Any questions on trucks before I go to cargo handling equipment? We just have a few more slides.
I had a quick question. I mean, you guys have like a gate when trucks come to the port. Do you keep a record of visits from individual trucks?
Our port police do not check the trucks. What we do is we ask the tenants to check and report just for the drayage truck compliance. We ask them to get the information and report it to the port. So no, we don't take any stats on trucks that come in, as long as they have the proper security credentials.
Right, they just need the twig card.
Yeah.
So is there any sort of trip counting ritual that exists already? Like just on the roadways out at the port?
There's nothing that's set up standard. We are in the process of putting together a truck route and a traffic study. So it's not in any regular schedule, Matt. It's just on an as needed basis.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the next source category is cargo handling equipment. This is all of the equipment that operates on the terminals. Again, the strategies are new equipment and zero emissions. And there's a lot of movement on zero emissions, as Jeff knows firsthand, since the Port of Stockton is one of the first ports in the country to really deploy significant quantities of zero emissions cargo handling equipment. The opportunities here is that the equipment is a captive fleet. It is here. It is not leaving the Port of Stockton. So it's lots of opportunities to look at some strategies to turn that equipment over to zero emissions or to other lower emitting technologies. The Port of Stockton also owns most of the equipment itself. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And for the equipment that it doesn't own, it has a direct connection to those terminal operators that own the equipment. It's got leases, might have other types of agreements. So there's some mechanism there that we might be able to get at that cargo handling equipment. Funding is available. The zero emissions transition has already begun, and the state is working on a regulation. We'll probably hear more about it this year and into 2023 to control the emissions from the cargo handling equipment even more. Remember, if you can, going back to the charts that we showed at the very beginning from the emissions inventory, cargo handling equipment doesn't have a huge footprint in terms of the emissions contributing at the Port of Stockton. So it's one of the easiest categories to get, but it doesn't get you the same kind of bang for the buck in terms of emission reductions. But there's no low-hanging fruit anymore, so we have to look at everything. And so we'll be looking at strategies for this as well.
Renee, I did just want to mention that, so we did do the math, about 60% of our cargo handling equipment is zero emission.
Which is amazing. That's great. Some of the challenges are that the equipment is more expensive than diesel, and again, we've got the charging and fueling infrastructure. All right, this is the last one, which is Harborcraft. Harborcraft are the tugboats, any of the work boats that might service the Port of Stockton, and new engines. Again, great emission reduction strategy, as are new tugboats. The newest, cleanest engines, it makes more sense to just replace the whole tugboat. So a lot of companies are choosing to do that. There's also shore power for tugs, so that, you know, when they're sort of in between calls, they can pull up to the dock, plug in, so they're able to power their onboard systems, but they don't have to run their engines. And then we're starting to see alternative fuels, renewable diesel, natural gas, different types of technologies emerging. Zero emissions is still probably a really long ways away for Harborcraft, but there are some companies that are starting to get involved in either hydrogen tugs or even some battery electric assist. The opportunities are that CARB is poised to amend the Harborcraft regulation. It's basically adopted, and the key elements in that Harborcraft regulation is that the Harborcraft operators will be required to upgrade to what we call Tier 4 plus. Tier 4 is just an indicator that the EPA uses to mark the new engine standard. So Tier 4 is the cleanest engine standard you can get for a tugboat. And the plus is for a diesel particulate filter, which is added to control the particulate matter, which we know is the health risk. There are cleaner combustion technologies available. Tier 4 engines have been certified by the EPA. They're ready to go. There's only 2 Harborcraft operators in Stockton and only 6 tickets. So it sort of seems like a manageable problem. And I think, you know, we've been doing a lot of outreach to some of the industry folks as well. And we had a great meeting with one of the tugboat operators in Stockton, and the plan is to bring them to one of the meetings so you can hear from them some of the things that they're doing to reduce their emissions. Yeah, there was a comment about muting if you're not speaking.
I just muted somebody. Sorry for doing that to you.
And then there is funding available to repower, replace Harborcraft.
Yeah, Renee, maybe you can repeat those last couple sentences because I do think it's really important that, we have two tug companies here. One of them has done a really good job. I think we talked to one of the companies and they've already got a tier 4 tug. And I think they're looking to do additional improvements and looking for opportunities to partner with us. So we are working closely with them. And as Renee mentioned, we're going to have them come and speak at one of the upcoming meetings, just talk about some of the challenges they've had and some of the future challenges they see with going to tier 4+. So.
Yep. Some of the challenges, the new tugs are very expensive. There's also this issue of the tier 4 engines, these cleanest available engines require more space. And we're finding that sometimes depending on the width of the channel or the waterway, the tugs are constrained in terms of how much they can physically grow and still fit in the area. So that's something that we need to work with the Harborcraft operators to really understand what some of those constraints might be. The operators also sort of have this duopoly. It's not, you need tugboats, and so you can't be so aggressive that you run all the tugboat operators out of business because you put the port out of business. But again, I think because there's these two operators, it's far more manageable to work with them on emission reduction strategies. The port also has no direct connection to the Harborcraft operators. They're typically hired directly from the shipping lines that use those services. Okay, hold on. Trying to advance. I don't know if something has frozen. Okay, here we go. Okay, so any questions about any of the sources that we talked about? This is the last slide. I know I've gone on for a long time.
We're doing okay on, so if there are any questions with regard to what Renee just presented, please ask, and otherwise we'll keep moving.
So this is the final slide. It's just showing the remainder of the process. We can now officially check the box that we've talked about emission reduction strategies. And the plan for next month is to talk about implementation mechanisms. How can the Port of Stockton get operators to invest in some of these different technologies or operational changes? So that'll be the discussion for next month. In the meantime, we are continuing to meet with different terminal operators and different operators at the port to understand their operations a little bit more and where there might be some opportunities to reduce their emissions. And then, as I noted, from March through June, that's when each month we'll bring to this committee a more detailed presentation about a particular source. And we'll start with Harborcraft, and we'll get one of the tugboat operators to come and talk a little bit about what they're working on, and we'll talk through some preliminary ideas for strategies that the Port of Stockton might be considering. And then in April, we'll do trucks, the cargo handling equipment in May, and then ships and rail, we'll do a combined presentation in June. And then we will sort of retreat for a little bit and over the summer work on putting together the draft clean air plan, which we'll share with this group, get some feedback before we finalize at the end of the year. So I'm going to stop sharing.
And it looks like Willie has a question. So before we move to the next topic, which is just some updates on some activities at the port, go ahead, Willie.
Great, thanks. Obviously, it's a lot of emission sources, a lot of emission reduction strategies, a lot of factors in play. Is there like a master sheet where we're tracking all of these initiatives and kind of analyzing, what our priority list is in terms of, must have, nice to have, what's the emission reduction per dollar invested? Like, how are we, it's kind of, obviously this presentation is to give us a survey of the land, but I would assume in future steps we'd potentially rank them or kind of understand the implications of pursuing one strategy over another. So I'm kind of curious how we're tracking that, how we're analyzing that in comparison to one another. Personally, for me, in terms of my opinion, is I would love to see us approaching those that have the biggest emission responsibility, but also those that are the easiest to implement and execute. But I'm just kind of curious about the approach there.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent point. And if you remember, months and months ago, we came to this committee with some objectives for this plan, where we said, you know, as we look at the full suite of possibilities of strategies, here's the criteria that we would use to guide which strategies we select. And cost effectiveness, which you brought up rightly, is one of those metrics that we would use. You know, and some of the others involved workforce development and making sure to balance the economic activity with the emission reductions. So all of those will be considerations as we look at the different strategies. Some of the strategies are going to fall out because they're just not going to work at the Port of Stockton. You know, vessel speed reduction is not going to be a strategy for Stockton because the vessels are already moving very slowly. So there's nothing more to be gained there. And then the plan that we're developing is sort of the overarching, here's what we plan to do. Then there's going to have to be decisions made, you know, as you point out, well, what do we tackle first? Because the port's not going to be able to do all of it at once. And I think you're right. The port needs to focus on what are the relatively easy ones that we can do first that give us a good bang for the buck. And so there's sort of an implementation timeline that also starts to kick in even once we've had the plan developed. But I think this is why we've planned, you know, months and months of coming to this group and sort of talking through, because there are going to be a lot of those types of decisions that need to be made and a lot of discussion that needs to be had around these different strategies.
Yeah, Willie, just to follow on that, I mean, that's exactly why we're here, is to figure out, you know, what is the best bang for our buck? What is some low-hanging fruit? You know, that doesn't mean the port's sitting on our hands right now. If we see an opportunity, you know, we're still have our eyes open and we're looking for, you know, we know that we've got additional cargo handling equipment that we can potentially replace. But everything you mentioned is exactly where we're hoping this plan leads to.
Okay. I don't see any other hands. I'm going to go ahead and share the last part of our slide deck, close out the meeting.
Yeah, Kim, we're and you think we need to call an audible here? We've got just about 10 minutes left. I know that Matt Hart is here from Momentum. We've started working on our California Energy Commission electric vehicle blueprint project, which I know I've been talking about for months, and it has been delayed a little bit by the agency. And so while Matt's here, I'm going to ask that we kind of bump the Green Marine discussion for today and ask Matt to kind of give us an update on the CEC, the California Energy Commission grant project.
Are you really quickly, what are you guys seeing on your screen?
Port initiative highlights.
And it is the CEC blueprint?
Yes. Yeah, it's on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Matt, are you there?
I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Great. Thank you. Yes.
All right. I think from a timing perspective, this is probably very relevant following up on the work and presentation from Renee. So the Port of Stockton, just as a background, I think you probably already know this, was selected by the California Energy Commission to receive some funding in order to develop a medium and heavy duty electric vehicle blueprint And the purpose of this funding is to be able to organize and plan around how to go from where we are today to what we're doing in the future. And it builds on a lot of the work that Renee's team is doing around evaluating emissions inventories, looking at what are the pieces of technology that are being used today, what are the ones that are coming out, how do we think about the regulations, and structure and organize the port so that they can build that priority list. And sorry, I didn't catch who asked the question, but something around building out the plan and approach to doing that by engaging with a number of stakeholders, coming up with timelines based on when infrastructure could be available, what type of technologies are available now, who are the financing partners who can help support these programs, who can support them today, what needs to change if they're going to support them tomorrow. And we just did our kickoff meeting with the CEC yesterday. So very, very, very beginning of the process. And I'm sure we'll be presenting on our progress throughout this. The planning process is intended to take about a year. And Starcrest's team and also Rebel, who I saw on the meeting, are all part of that group. So I think a lot of the work that's been going through in these meetings will be brought to bear in that process. So our team and with a company called Momentum, we're based out of Sacramento, and have worked with the port on a number of their zero emission deployments in the past. We won't have to catch up from scratch with all the good work. Jeff, is that the high level that you were looking for? You want me to go into any other specific details?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody has any questions about the process, but I'll kind of open it up and see if there are any questions for the last few minutes here.
Hi, this is Matt. I just had a quick question, Matt, about the CEC program that you're working through. I missed. Are they funding work at this port, or are we just bringing this port into compliance with the CEC?
This is funding work in order to advance their zero emission technologies at the port. So when the Energy Commission is funding these types of projects is in advance of the regulations. So this is to help the port get out in front of it.
Okay, and they don't require you to work with anybody besides the port on that?
The Energy Commission funded 42 different blueprint projects as part of this. It was a competitive solicitation. The port in 2020 in the fall put together a application. Over the spring of 2021, they were notified of the award. And with all the different contracts that the Energy Commission is processing right now, their contracts division has been a little bit delayed. So we were just able to get under contract this month and had the kickoff call yesterday.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm mostly interested because I feel like the CEC never, the state's agencies don't know what the right hand and the left hand are doing. And so between the Air Resources Board and their GHG, myopia, and the CEC and the CPUC and all that, I really don't want to learn about another agency, but I guess I'm going to learn about this one too. So thank you.
Yeah, and I know they do try to coordinate with each other, but I do hear you and I understand there's a lot of people there and the communication doesn't always filter down to absolutely everyone. Looks like there's another hand up, Jasmine.
Yeah, go ahead, Jasmine.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of Matt's question, I mean, I guess the question that it raises for me is there some sort of community engagement process that's part of implementing the blueprint or developing the blueprint? And
that's a great question.
Is that what you were asking, Matt? Because that's the question that I have is that a whole separate outreach and engagement process that you all are going to undergo?
Yeah, I was kind of trying to.
Can we get ahead of that? Yeah, can we be involved in that
without joining one?
You will not have to join a new one, I promise you. So the first task that is in the scope of work with the Port of Stockton is to do community engagement. And our plan is to do that through already existing forums like this one. There is absolutely not a goal to create another meeting where we have to go talk about the same things. So I believe I will very likely be joining this one since I see a number of the other team members on this call already. So we're all here.
Thanks for that, Matt. I would also recommend connecting with Alejandro Cruz, who I think is still on this call, but coordinates the work of our Rice Stockton Coalition, which is our environmental justice coalition. So it'd be great to sync up. So thanks, and thanks for your work.
Thanks, and that's very helpful. Yeah, yeah. And if there's any other folks that people know about that we should coordinate with throughout that process, we'd love to hear it.
Okay, well, the last update is on the strategic planning effort, Jeff, and then we can close out the meeting for this afternoon. You've got 3 more minutes.
Okay, yeah, thanks. So I know that a lot of you participated in the strategic plan interviews and things like that. So you're probably wondering what's happened. And so with the onboarding of the new director, we have kind of put a pause on that to kind of reassess some things, but we are going to be taking that back up very soon. And I think the latest timing we have is second quarter of 2022. So hopefully we'll be updating you and providing some additional information very soon. So just wanted to provide an update on that. And that's all I have.
Okay. Any other parting questions or comments before we close out for the afternoon? Not seeing any new hands. Jasmine,
I do want to.
Still up. Okay, good. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Jeff.
No, I just wanted to apologize to Shannon. Shannon, we'll get to you and Green Marine next meeting.
It's all good. It'll be fun to learn some more stuff around it too. Since we're already doing the audit, you guys will have a lot more info to hear next time.
Perfect. Yeah, the reason why we wanted Shannon to talk is we're in the middle of doing the recertification for Green Marine. So we do that every couple of years, and I think it's every 3 years based on last year was delayed from COVID. So just wanted to provide everybody an update on that process and the metrics that go into that. So
next month will be even better.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, our next meeting is in your calendar, hopefully, and it is February 16th at the same time, 4 p.m. We'll probably push out a reminder through Outlook again right for the meeting, a couple days, just again to make sure it's on your calendars. But this particular link, as I said in the beginning, is the link for the next 2 additional meetings as well. So it's a reoccurring for the first 3 months of the year. We really appreciate all the good discussion tonight, and we will send out a summary and talk soon. If you have any other questions or comments, please feel free to continue to reach out to Jeff. I know he's always interested in hearing from you, even in between the meetings. So thank you so much and have a great night.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.